I think you feel really confident that it was divinely ordered. Maybe all of this, our friendship, you becoming our neighbor, the depth of our friendship, and then these opportunities that we both have to be able to uplift each other.
For years, Meghan Markle's rise has been surrounded by rumors, denials, and fierce public debate, but few claims have ignited curiosity like this. A Saudi prince has stepped forward, releasing what he calls evidence tied to alleged paid yacht nights, instantly sending shockwaves through royal watchers and Hollywood alike. The claims are explosive, the timing suspicious, and the implications unsettling, and audiences are struggling to separate truth from rumor. Are these documents credible revelations, calculated distractions, or something far more damaging unfolding behind closed doors? The yacht photos that shook the internet. The reaction was immediate, intense, and impossible to ignore. The moment the photos appeared on social media, the internet seemed to hold its breath and then explode. Comment sections flooded. Notifications rang non-stop. Screens refreshed endlessly. This was not the familiar worn-out argument about yachts and luxury that many people had dismissed for years as gossip or overblown rumor. This time felt different. This time, the visuals spoke loudly, clearly.
To do some form of therapy, or at least be able to talk more about.
And with unsettling confidence. The images were sharp and detailed, leaving little to the imagination. They appeared to show Meghan moving through Monaco and other glamorous Mediterranean locations during the years before her royal life began. The scenes were unmistakably upscale, sunlit decks of private yachts that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime, tables set with fine drinks and effortless elegance, clothing that whispered designer labels without needing to shout. Everything about the setting suggested comfort, access, and exclusivity. But what truly caught attention was not just the luxury itself, it was the company. In the background of several photos were faces that some international business observers quickly recognized. These were not random holidaymakers or anonymous party guests. They were individuals known in elite financial and social circles, people associated with serious wealth, global connections, and quiet influence. Their presence changed the tone of the conversation almost instantly. For years, discussions around Meghan's pre-royal life had floated online without solid footing. Old photos were blurry, sources were uncertain, supporters and critics alike argued endlessly, each side leaning on interpretation rather than proof. These new images shifted that balance. Their clarity left far less room for denial or dismissal. They showed environments and experiences that Meghan had never openly spoken about, at least not in detail. That silence, more than the images themselves, made people curious. Questions surfaced rapidly and refused to fade. How did she gain access to these spaces?
And I think a lot of that gets lost in what can be super dehumanizing when you look at the clickbait culture. And
who extended the invitations? Who covered the costs of travel, accommodation, and entry into such tightly guarded circles? None of these questions came with immediate answers, and the absence of explanations only fueled speculation. Curiosity turned into obsession at record speed. Within hours, hashtags surged to the top of trending lists across multiple platforms. TikTok creators began slow, careful breakdowns of each image, zooming in on reflections, background details, and subtle clues. Twitter users, now faster than any newsroom, compared dates, mapped locations, and linked names. Online forums filled with long threads, some stretching thousands of words, as users worked collectively to build timelines and theories. The pace was dizzying, almost overwhelming. What truly separated this moment from earlier controversies was not just the quality of the photos, but their alleged origin. Claims began to circulate that these images did not come from fans, paparazzi, or leaked press archives. Instead, they were said to be pulled from private collections. Someone, somewhere, had kept them quietly for years. Someone had chosen not to share them until now.
certainly after the pandemic and everything else, we crave that. We crave being able to go high and
That detail alone made the timing feel heavy with meaning. Meghan was in the midst of a carefully planned public reinvention. New projects, media appearances, and lifestyle ventures were all designed to present a refined, intentional narrative. Then suddenly this unseen chapter from her past re-emerged. To many observers, the coincidence felt too neat, too precise, to be accidental. As the debate grew louder, one question echoed above all others, lingering uncomfortably in the background. If images this clear, this revealing, and this carefully timed could remain hidden for so long, what else might still be waiting, unseen and unexplained, beyond the edge of the screen? How was Meghan's past revealed? What called for the revelation? Let's delve into the details of Meghan's pre-royal sojourn in the Middle East. Inside the elite circles no one talks about. According to several people connected to powerful social circles in the Gulf region, Meghan's presence at high-profile events during those years was not accidental or random. They say she was not simply showing up at parties for fun or excitement. Instead, she was slowly and deliberately building connections across Monaco and other parts of the Mediterranean. These were places usually reserved for people with enormous wealth, deep influence, and strong global ties. Access to such spaces was rare and carefully controlled. These gatherings were not public parties but tightly controlled, invitation-only events. Every attendee was vetted, known in advance, and approved for a specific purpose, making attendance a sign of trust and influence. Insiders say nothing was accidental, especially who gained access. Though they appeared to be luxurious yacht vacations from the outside, their true function was discreet networking. Away from cameras and publicity, powerful individuals met to build trust, exchange opportunities, and form strategic alliances. Privacy was critical, silence was expected, and strict confidentiality governed everything. What occurred within those private spaces remained there, protected by understanding and mutual interest. One insider explained that introductions in such circles were never random. Someone always made the call. Someone always gave approval. Someone decided that a particular person had value and was worth bringing into that protected world. For that reason, those close to these networks strongly believed that Meghan's access was not accidental. She did not wander in. She was brought in. What caught many people's attention in the leaked images was how comfortable she appeared. She did not look unsure or overwhelmed. She did not seem like someone who had suddenly stumbled into luxury by luck. Instead, she appeared calm.
40 friends to donate 40 minutes of their time to help mentor a woman who's mobilizing back into the workforce.
Confident and aware of how to behave in that environment. To those who understood that world, this detail mattered greatly. Comfort suggested familiarity. Familiarity suggested prior exposure. Sources explained that this type of networking required a very specific kind of person. One had to be well-spoken, socially polished, and pleasant company. Travel often involved restricted locations that were not publicly advertised. Attendance meant following unwritten rules, including never speaking openly about who you met or why you were there. This was not about fame or public recognition. It was about being useful, adaptable, and above all, discreet. During her early years as an actress, Meghan appeared to fit this description well. She was driven and ambitious, yet not widely famous. That combination, insiders say, made her appealing in elite networking spaces. She could move quietly without attracting attention. At the same time, she was seen appearing in international settings that seemed far beyond what her known income could easily support. According to those in the know, access of that level usually came through sponsorship, invitation, or endorsement, not coincidence. What added even more weight to the story was a claim that began to spread quietly but persistently. Some alleged that the leaked yacht photos did not come from outsiders or random observers. Instead, they supposedly came from someone within those elite circles, someone who had been present, someone who understood the rules, and still chose to break the silence.
Because it feels really inclusive and there's representation and it's just like a sweet love story.
If that claim were true, insiders said, it changed the meaning of everything. It would mean that the long-standing quiet protection around this period had been intentionally lifted. Someone had decided that this chapter should no longer remain hidden, and in circles where silence is the highest currency, breaking it is never done without reason. To those watching closely, this shift raised new questions rather than answers. Why speak now? And why through images instead of words? In a world built on quiet agreements and mutual protection, any break in loyalty carries meaning. Whether driven by regret, rivalry, or timing, the release suggested that the story was no longer fully controlled and that more layers might remain unseen by the public eye. How did Meghan respond to the revelation? Did she deny it or threaten? Why did she respond the way she did? Let's find out. The choice to step away and write her own story. There comes a moment in some people's lives when a difficult lesson becomes impossible to ignore. It is the moment they realize that no matter how carefully they explain themselves, they cannot control how others tell their story. You can speak your truth clearly, provide context, defend your intentions, and correct false claims.
I had to be talking to the people in the room with me. And that was the crew. And on Suits, we had a crew of over 200 people.
Yet once your story leaves your hands and enters the public space, it changes. It becomes shaped by opinions, emotions, suspicions, and hidden agendas that you have no power over. According to many who watched her journey closely, this was a realization Meghan Markle eventually reached. She discovered that she could not force the world to describe her the way she wished to be described. She could not decide which parts of her past would be highlighted and which would be ignored. She could not determine how people would judge her motives or interpret her choices. Every attempt to explain seemed to create more debate, not less. Every effort to correct a narrative appeared to invite another wave of speculation. Over time, the struggle itself became exhausting. So, instead of fighting every headline and every opinion, she chose a different path. She stepped back. She reduced her public presence. She asked for privacy and created distance between herself and the constant noise of public judgment. The idea appeared simple and even logical. If the world insisted on telling its own version of her story, then she would stop participating in the argument. She would live quietly and tell her story only on her own terms, away from cameras, commentators, and endless commentary. But silence has limits. Silence does not rewrite the past, and it does not erase curiosity. It only postpones the moment when unresolved questions return. Stories left unfinished tend to resurface, often in unexpected ways.
Providing them with access to education is the key to economic and social development.
In January 2026, that return happened suddenly and dramatically. The Internet, known for its long memory and short patience, came alive almost overnight. New yacht photographs appeared online. Images Meghan was believed to have kept private and securely hidden. These were not old photos that had already circulated and been debated to exhaustion. They were not blurry images taken from outdated websites. They were sharp, clear, and unfamiliar, and their novelty made them impossible to ignore. Within hours, they spread across platforms, shared, analyzed, and discussed by millions. What made this moment especially intense was not only that the images were new, but what they seemed to show. Meghan appeared in extremely exclusive and carefully guarded environments she had never publicly spoken about. These were not ordinary social settings. They were rare spaces, closed to the public, and typically associated with extraordinary wealth, power, and influence. The images raised questions that had never fully disappeared, only faded into the background. As the photos circulated, quiet rumors grew louder. Individuals claiming connections to Middle Eastern high society began speaking more openly, suggesting that the images aligned with stories they believed for years about her life before royal fame. What had once been whispered in small circles was now being repeated in public forums, fueling renewed debate and speculation.
I wanted to cover all my bases. Finally, I wrote to the soap manufacturer.
In a matter of days, the narrative Meghan had hoped to leave behind returned with force. The past she had stepped away from came knocking again, reminding everyone that retreat does not always bring closure. Sometimes, it simply delays the moment when the story demands to be told again. This moment served as a reminder of a larger truth about public life in the digital age. Once a person becomes a subject of global interest, privacy becomes fragile and control becomes temporary. The public does not simply observe stories, it reshapes them, revisits them, and revives them whenever new material appears. Withdrawal may offer peace for a time, but it does not guarantee forgetting. For figures like Meghan, every chapter, spoken or unspoken, remains part of a wider narrative that others feel entitled to examine. And so, the story continues, not because she chose to reopen it, but because the world rarely lets a story rest when curiosity still burns. Beneath the surface, has there been any action of hers that suggested her ties with the Saudi royal family? What exactly happened? Let's dive into the details of Meghan and the Saudi link. What the earrings reveal. The story that resurfaced in 2021 about Meghan Markle and a pair of earrings is one that sits at the uncomfortable crossroads of fashion, power, and global politics. At first glance, it appears to be a simple tale about jewelry worn at a royal event, but when examined more closely, it becomes a layered narrative about symbolism, timing, and the silent messages carried by public appearances. According to reports, Meghan Markle wore diamond drop earrings that had been gifted to her by Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. What made this choice controversial was not the earrings themselves, but the moment in history in which they were worn. Just 3 weeks earlier, Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist, Washington Post columnist, and outspoken critic of the Saudi government, had been killed inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. His death shocked the world and quickly became one of the most talked-about human rights cases of the decade. International intelligence agencies, including those of the United States, later concluded that the killing had been approved at the highest levels of Saudi leadership. As details emerged, the crime was described as deliberate and brutal, drawing condemnation from governments, journalists, and human rights organizations across the globe. The incident deeply damaged the public image of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who until then had often been presented as a reform-minded leader, seeking to modernize Saudi Arabia. It was against this tense and emotionally charged backdrop that Meghan appeared at a formal state dinner in Fiji during an official royal tour in 2018. On the surface, the event was part of routine diplomatic duties carried out by members of the British royal family. Photographs from the dinner showed Meghan dressed elegantly, wearing the diamond earrings that would later become the focus of scrutiny. At the time, little attention was paid to the origin of the jewelry. Only later did reports reveal that the earrings were believed to be a wedding gift from the Saudi crown prince. The revelation sparked debate and criticism, largely centered on symbolism rather than intent. To many observers, wearing a gift linked to a figure associated with such a serious human rights scandal felt insensitive, especially so soon after the killing. Others argued that the choice reflected the rigid and often complicated rules governing royal protocol, rather than a personal statement by Meghan herself. In the British royal system, gifts given by foreign leaders to members of the royal family are not considered personal property. Instead, they are officially owned by the Crown. This means that such items are catalogued, stored, and sometimes made available for use during formal occasions. Members of the royal family may wear these items, but they do so as representatives of the institution, not as private individuals freely choosing their accessories. Meghan's legal team later addressed the matter, explaining that when she reportedly described the earrings as borrowed, she was likely referring to borrowing them from the Crown's collection, not directly from the Saudi prince. This clarification aimed to emphasize that the earrings were part of the royal inventory, and that Meghan did not personally own them or accept them independently. Still, the episode highlights a broader issue about the modern role of public figures, especially those who command global attention. In an age where images travel instantly and symbolism is closely analyzed, even small details like jewelry can take on powerful meanings. What might once have been dismissed as a minor fashion choice now becomes a subject of ethical debate and public reflection. Ultimately, the controversy is less about Meghan Markle as an individual, and more about the complex systems she was part of at the time. It raises questions about tradition versus awareness, protocol versus personal values, and how institutions respond to changing global expectations. The earrings, simple objects of beauty, became a reminder that, in the public eye, nothing exists in isolation. Every choice, however small, can echo far beyond the room in which it is made. Was there really a correlation in dates that confirms the revelations? Could there have been more to it? Let's take a look at the matching dates and facts. The timeline that changed everything. When people started matching dates and timelines, the story took on a new and far more captivating shape. What once looked like scattered images suddenly formed a sequence that invited deeper questions. The photographs, said to have been taken between 2008 and 2012, showed moments from a period when Meghan was commonly described as a struggling actress in Los Angeles. She was taking small roles, appearing briefly on television, and doing what many aspiring actors do just to survive. Friends and interviews from that time painted a picture of financial uncertainty and professional frustration. Yet the images told another story running quietly alongside that one. They placed her aboard luxury yachts in Monaco and sailing through the Mediterranean, regions famously linked with extreme wealth, influence, and discretion. These were not casual holiday spots. They were elite spaces, often frequented by billionaires, financiers, political players, and global power brokers. For many observers, the contrast was striking. How did someone reportedly scraping by in Hollywood repeatedly appear in environments that few people ever access, even once? As people examined the dates more closely, patterns began to surface. The photos were not from a single summer or a one-off invitation. They appeared across several years. Different yachts, similar settings, familiar types of guests. This repetition made coincidence harder to accept. Consistency on that level suggested intention, planning, and access rather than random luck. Then attention shifted to 2011, a year that would quietly change everything. Meghan landed her role on Suits, the legal drama that finally gave her financial stability and public recognition. In Hollywood, most actors fight for years through endless auditions, rejections, and near misses before landing a breakthrough. Industry watchers had long whispered that her path onto Suits did not fully match that typical struggle. The role seemed to arrive with surprising smoothness, and the connections that helped make it happen were never clearly explained. With the resurfacing of the yacht photos, those unanswered questions grew louder. To some, the timing no longer felt accidental. The leap from small roles to a steady television job appeared less mysterious when placed beside years spent in elite international circles. It suggested that valuable relationships may have been forming long before her name became recognizable. The pattern became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Multiple yachts, multiple seasons, the same world of influence appearing again and again. This was not the rhythm of chance encounters. It looked more like careful positioning within powerful social networks. By the time 2016 arrived, another pivotal chapter opened. Meghan met Prince Harry through connections linked to Soho House, a private members club known for gathering celebrities, creatives, and influential figures. By then, insiders noted, she was not stepping into elite spaces for the first time. She already knew the language, the expectations, and the subtle rules of those environments. She understood how power operates, how relationships are cultivated, and how presence can be leveraged. To many watching from the outside, this reframed her story entirely. What once seemed like a fairy tale leap from obscurity to royalty began to resemble the result of years of preparation, years spent quietly navigating influential circles. Years of learning how access works long before public attention followed. Importantly, none of this proved wrongdoing. Networking is neither illegal nor inherently unethical. Many people build success through relationships. Still, this emerging timeline challenged the familiar narrative of a rise built solely on raw talent, perseverance, and hardship. That tension between image and implication became the core of the controversy, leaving the public to question where ambition ends and storytelling begins. For supporters, the revised narrative simply highlighted intelligence and adaptability in a competitive world. For critics, it raised uncomfortable questions about transparency and authenticity. Either way, the discussion refused to fade. Each rereading of the timeline encouraged fresh interpretations, new debates, and stronger reactions. In the end, the intrigue endured not because of what could be proven, but because of what seemed possible, reminding audiences how power, access, and perception often shape destinies as much as talent ever does behind the scenes, worldwide quietly. How did fans feel about Meghan's silence? Was there any response from her inner circle? Could the silence be sending a message intentionally? Let's find out. Silence, strategy, and the questions that won't go away. What stood out most in this entire moment was not what followed, but what did not. After the images began to circulate, Meghan and the people around her said nothing at all. There were no press releases, no calm explanations, no effort to add background or meaning. No one stepped forward to explain who organized the events, why she attended, or what role she played. The photos moved quickly across social media and news sites, yet the response remained empty and silent. The silence surrounding the images spoke volumes to observers. Many felt that if there were an innocent explanation, a brief clarification would have been offered. Instead, the lack of response fueled curiosity and suspicion. Questions emerged about the source of the glamorous lifestyle, the connections behind exclusive access, and the depth of those relationships. More troubling still was why the photos remained hidden for over a decade, only to surface now. Timing added fuel to the fire. At the same time these images surfaced, Meghan was presenting herself to the public in a fresh way. She was promoting a story of authenticity, independence, and steady self-made progress. The yacht photos seemed to pull at the edges of that image. To some, they hinted at a different path, one shaped by careful networking within wealthy and powerful circles around the world, a chapter that had never been clearly explained. What unsettled many people even more was the idea that these images had been kept somewhere, untouched, for years. Someone had chosen not to release them earlier. Someone had waited. That suggested planning and patience, not accident. It meant that the public image being shared today had always rested on fragile ground, vulnerable to a sudden shift whenever the past was brought into the light. As discussions grew louder, insiders began to whisper that this might not be the end. They believed the release could be a test, a signal, or even a warning. If a few photos could cause this much reaction, what else might exist? More images, more stories, more people willing to speak about what they saw and experienced. The idea that others were watching closely only deepened the tension. Meghan now stood at a crossroads. One option was to remain silent and hope public attention would eventually move on, as it often does. The other was to speak, to offer explanations, and risk opening doors to closer examination of parts of her life she had always kept private. Neither choice was easy. Silence could be read as avoidance, while speaking could invite deeper questions and harsher judgment. At the center of it all remained one unanswered question. Does the story end here, or is this only the first chapter? For now, the images remain online, shared and reshared. Conversations continue in comment sections, podcasts, and private messages. And the silence continues too, steady and unbroken. In a world that never truly forgets and rarely stops watching, silence is never empty. It fills the space with theories, expectations, and doubt. Whether intended or not, that quiet has become the most powerful and fascinating part of this unfolding story, leaving people waiting, wondering, and listening for what may come next. Every hour without a response seems to stretch the story further. Silence allows others to control the meaning, to frame the narrative, and to decide what matters most. In modern culture, where every move is analyzed and archived, choosing not to speak is also a message. It suggests caution, calculation, or uncertainty. Until clarity arrives, the public fills the gaps on its own, proving once again that unanswered questions often linger longer than any explanation ever could. And so the waiting continues. suspended between past secrets and future revelations, yet to unfold slowly now. So, what do you think about the revelations? Do you think Meghan's silence is helpful? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.